Dermot, we are in your lovely little garden in South London. How large is it?
It's about 80 feet long by, I think it's 23 wide. And 80 feet is 23 metres, something like that. So it's very long and thin.
What was here before you arrived? When did you come here?
We came here in 2002, I think. And the garden was really a tip. It was an elderly couple that lived in this site. And they moved out as we moved in, and pretty much we've removed everything apart from Lonicera natada, which is the centrepiece of the garden.
That's quite a big level change. How big is the difference and how many levels do you have now?
There's probably about a metre from the back of the garden down to where we're sitting now, and that's the change. And what we've done is we've sloped the garden back down and then cut out near the house. And we've just put a series of decks bouncing up through the space to create a pathway of different areas that meet at a shed at the back.
How big is your family?
My family, I have 4 in my family, or 5 with a dog.
What are they doing in the garden?
Well, everybody's doing different things in the garden. My dog likes to dig and destroy plants. My daughter likes to play with the fountain. My son is just getting into planting, and my wife and I would rather like to relax.
How do you keep the dog from digging up the plants then?
There is no way of protecting them. What we've tended to do is anything that we really want to keep and treasure, we've now started to put into pots and place them all around the garden. Anything that we want to eat or anything that we want to grow, that we want to protect, we're starting to put up high. We also have another problem here with slugs, bits of wildlife. This garden really attracts slugs, and some of the plants in here get eaten very quickly. So we've come up with ideas of hanging baskets and hanging troughs.
You have a very clever herb garden and growing strawberries. Tell us a bit more about it.
This is part of the reason for raising everything up. We're doing that because this is the sunny part of the garden, and they're going to get most heat from that. It keeps the slugs off it, keeps the dog off it, and it keeps my daughter from pulling all of the flowers off before they're ready to ripen.
You have such a small space, and yet you have used real trees. How did you do it?
Well, the real trees that we've got is we've got a cherry here. It's a small rootstock cherry, so it should stay the same size. At the back we have a Judas tree. The Judas tree I just love because you can prune off the lower branches and create a canopy, which allows again for this framing to happen. And we've got a weeping birch, and none of these trees are going to get to more than about 3 or 4 metres in height.
Well, you being a garden designer, do you have any good advice to give people who have this tiny, narrow garden, how to make it look bigger, feel bigger?
Well, I think the first thing to designing a garden is you've got to think of how you're going to be using a garden, and that's going to tell you where you might want to sit. I think there are some visual tricks that you can use where you repeat shapes throughout the garden, so you take them down the garden.
Would you suggest still having lawn or not at all?
If you're going to have kids running around on it or a dog, I've opted not to have a lawn because it's going to need replacing every year, I would imagine. The only part of lawn that we've got is just one just here, which is really so that the kids have a space to sit and they can have tea on the lawn on a nice day and bring out some cake. The dog's now adopted it as his favourite spot to sit in the sun.
Is it a low-maintenance garden? This is what most people want these days.
It's a reasonably low-maintenance garden with the exception of probably the bamboos, which are the biggest deal, where we spend a day every year, well, day twice a year probably, cutting out 50% of them as they take over.
But the planting seems to be mainly green. Is it intentional?
It is. I love green. For me, it creates a rhythm in a space. We could introduce more flowers in a year or two. But generally, yes, it's a green garden. I like my garden to be green, and it's green all year round.